A mother with her children?
No. Al, I just saw Elvis.
They buried it, pulled it from rotation, and acted like it never existed. One Married with Children episode crossed a line so sharp that Fox locked it away for years. Now, it's finally ready to be seen. What made this 1/2 hour so explosive that it threatened sponsors and put a new network on edge? This lost episode didn't vanish. Someone made sure it stayed hidden. We'll track the moment Married with Children broke the formula. The episode that triggered alarms, how it quietly aired once, why it returns now, and why it still hits hard today. Rule Breaker TV arrives. Before this show, primetime families smiled, learned a lesson, and hugged it out before the credits. Then Fox put a different family on the screen, and the spell broke. Married with Children did not try to be sweet or soothing. It walked in with a sigh, a glare, and a punchline. Al Bundy sold shoes he hated to people he could not stand. Peg Bundy loved the couch and the remote more than chores or cooking. Kelly and Bud chased attention and easy wins. The setting was not a warm living room that fixed every problem by minute 21. It was a place where money ran short, tempers ran long. And the only thing that kept the day moving was a joke that stung just enough to make you laugh. The audience heard it loud and clear. This was not a show that would pretend life was neat. That first impression turned into a calling card. The writers cut out the soft music and the tidy wrap-up. They did not lecture. They did not stop to say how everyone should feel or what everyone should do next. They let mean thoughts slip into punchlines. They let pride and regret sit side by side. They used silence like a setup and the camera like a smirk. The promise was simple. If a joke is honest, it belongs. That honesty built a crowd. People who felt left out by glossy sitcoms found a mirror here. The show said that a job can grind you down, that a marriage can stall, that bills show up even when hope does not. It dared viewers to laugh at the mess, and laughing felt like relief. There was no lesson in the end, only the rhythm of banter and defeat. Somehow, that felt closer to the truth than any speech over a gentle piano. What followed The Voice were counter-opinions. Crude, unrefined, and careless were some names given by critics. Letters were written by community groups. Politicians lifted eyebrows. Censors underlined lines, cut riffs, and trimmed scenes. Everybody in this place learned to read the air. Certain kinds of jokes had to be cut to be aired. Certain scenes had to be treated gingerly to be aired, but the show never lost its cutting edge week to week. It targeted its host, its neighborhood, its children, and its vicinity. It expanded the discomfort so that the laughter would take the entire hit. That fairness mattered. The writers did not pick one target and pound it flat. They made the entire map a target and then made sure to hit themselves too. That way, the show could blurt out the impolite insights with no hint of sounding preachy. Such a balance real, hard truths, equally aimed, smoothly flowing, was the trick to walking the fine line between shock and sharpness. Another line lived beneath the floorboards, indisputable to everyone, but nameless to anyone. Puns were okay. Cheap boasts, sure. Wisecracks about money, pride, or age were okay too. The show could go after love and marriage, as long as the largest stayed cartoon. But whenever a story idea tiptoed beyond the threshold of shame and fear, an awkward silence tiptoed around. This silence was qualitatively different. It wasn't about taste, it was about risk. It became not, "Is that mean?" but, "Is that too real?" Dirty joke about a bad job, very loud and safe. Dirty joke about being out of control. All nerve endings are on this side of the set. Nerves that get pointed to headlines. Headlines that then point to meetings. Meetings lead to empty ad slots. For a new network trying to gain momentum, that's not comedy, it's hazardous. This was the very terrain Married with Children had mastered circumventing.
The last thing I want to do is spend the whole evening with people I don't know.
Now look, they are new in the neighborhood.
It could abolish the rules, but there had to be the first toe standing on them. It could lie at the altar of self-mockery, but not with any allegation that looked toward actual flesh and blood people nursing real wounds. That unspoken edict shaped drafts, rehearsals, and final edits. More often than not, it held. The show would put some welly into pushing the envelope, generating the laugh, and getting away cleans. But one week, the writers went into territory that breached that moral borderline. Farce or not, it had the good stuff. The punches, the strikes, everything that was a Married with Children signature. But underneath, it touched the nerve everybody had mutually agreed not to touch. And this was not simply another spicy half hour. It was a tipping point for a network that wanted to be edgy without teetering into bankruptcy. The writers thought they'd made another outrageous Bundy caper. The suits saw something else entirely. I'll see you in court. The setup looked like any other Bundy misadventure. Al and Peg, stuck in the rut of a stale marriage, decide to spice things up with a night away from home. Their plan isn't romantic, it's desperate. They check into a cheap roadside motel, the kind of place that feels more like a punchline than a getaway. For the Bundys, that's the joke.
To pay for my grilled cheese, I had to unload lobsters for 2 hours. Nice skateboard, bud.
Intimacy wrapped in dysfunction. But hidden in the walls of that motel is a twist that even they couldn't spin into comedy. Without their knowledge, cameras are rolling. Their night together is recorded, cataloged, and later discovered by strangers. The moment Al and Peg find out, the tone shifts. The laugh track keeps rolling, but the audience suddenly feels something else: unease. Relatively speaking, the script followed the formulaic path set out by the show. Humiliation, awkward romance, dirty jokes, courtroom anarchy, check, check. Yet this story cut deeper than most. It moved beyond a basic slapstick routine of Alcie's vexation or Peg's shopping closet. It toyed with something personal, something fragile. The oddity of Bundy's embarrassment somehow worked as an entryway into a shared paranoia of millions. The loss of control over the most intimate moments of one's life. The notion of being taped against your will was scarcely mentioned on television in 1989, before the era of social media and viral leaks. For Fox's executives, that hush was no accident. It was a barrier that nobody would dare tread over. After all, Married with Children had now finally taken a leap into an area where network comedy had no roadmap. Courtroom scenes just thinned. The couple's case against the motel was filled with innuendo, a lot of testimony, and jokes that flirted between absurdity and awkwardness. The laughs were there, though with wincing. Watching the Bundys try to recapture their dignity under the derisive laughter of a legal farce cut too closely to reality, exposing the helpless victims, little wrapped in punchlines. Now, for the devoted, this sharp edge is in the appeal. It's real enough to sting, funny enough to laugh at, and outrageous enough to remember. That was what it was. The perfect nightmare for executives and advertisers. A joke that's too plausible, too raw, and too closely tied to real-world anxieties about consent and exposure. It would have changed the tune from just another vulgar half-hour to red flag growing, I'll see you in court. The kind of subject matter that wasn't obscene in the conventional sense, didn't show or support indecency. What it did was worse. It blew against shame, violation, and those areas that no advertiser would ever want to be associated with closely. At a time when Fox was still proving it could compete with the big three networks, it wasn't worth the gamble. The episode was shot, edited, and ready to air. But when it got into the hands of executives, the decision came fast. This one wasn't going out. The silence made the call even more chilling. No public announcement, no big discussion, just a quiet burial. For the cast, it was another day in the life of filming. For the crew, it was just another wrap. For the fans, it turned into a rumor, a ghost episode whispered about, but never confirmed. The Bundys had always lived in a world of shame. This time, the humiliation wasn't theirs. It belonged to Fox. And to cover its back, the tried and proven network shut the door. The content spooked them, but a cultural lightning strike turned the spook into a shutdown. Boycott, backlash, and sponsors. The Bundys were already a target for critics, but the episode's fate was sealed when outside outrage hit the network where it hurt, its wallet. In 1989, one viewer, Terry Rakolta, stumbled onto an episode of Married with Children that she felt went too far. It wasn't "I'll see you in court," it was another raunchy installment filled with innuendo and snide remarks. But to Rakolta, a Michigan mother of 4, it wasn't just a tasteless sitcom, it was a cultural threat. She launched a campaign against the show, writing to advertisers and urging them to pull their money from Fox.
She made headlines when she waged a letter-writing campaign against the Fox TV sitcom Married with Children.
Until the network cleaned up its programming. The sponsors were, to many observers, astonishingly responsive. Prominent names on the scale of Coca-Cola and Kellogg's withdrew ads as unwilling to see their brands associated with something that was being angrily termed trash TV in the newspapers. In contrast, press attention in Rakolta's favor coalesced. She received accolades from conservative commentators, and critics of her act added fuel to the fire. Suddenly, Married with Children had transformed itself from a sitcom into the battlefield of a culture war over what TV ought to show and what it should not. For Fox, this was a nightmare. The network had built its identity on daring and flouting convention, but it was still cutting its teeth. Its whole strategy was now in jeopardy without the trust of its advertisers. In such a smart way, "I'll see you in a court" eventually became radioactive, and not just another edgy episode. For it was not merely an edgy episode, it was something very like a lawsuit waiting to be made, a headline waiting to be written, and a sponsorship boycott waiting to be rekindled. The tale focused on hidden cameras, voyeurism, and consent, the stuff that had made those within the corporate walls queasy, even before the boycott. Now, where public pressure was mounting, to air this program was not merely risky, but downright reckless. It was the perfect storm: moral outrage outside the studio and legal anxiety inside it. Therefore, Fox had only one option: to quietly bury the episode and hope fans forget it existed. The irony was brutal. The show aired jokes about necrophilia, crude comments about women, and entire episodes built upon the notion of objectifying Kelly Bundy. But those episodes remained on the air. What sealed the fate for "I'll see you in court" wasn't the filth, it was timing. In the wake of Rakolta's boycott, anything that probed real-world fears about privacy and exploitation became too hot to handle. Advertisers didn't want their logos next to courtroom jokes about illegal videotaping. Network executives could not afford to look the press in the eye and explain how a brand new network was normalizing voyeurism. The episode was not canceled for being too dirty. It was canceled for being too real. The disaster was invisible to casual viewers. It simply disappeared from the schedule. No press release was ever issued. It was removed from TV guides. It did not appear in the home video releases. For a few years, it existed in whispers and speculation. The fans argued whether it had been filmed at all or whether it had been destroyed before airing. The reality was a little less juicy and a lot more infuriating. They had the episode in the can, locked away, and unseen due to the fact that the wrong people at the wrong time decided it was safer just to bury that episode than have it possibly come back to haunt them. If the network buried it, did the people who made it agree with the funeral? Inside the set's shock. For the people who made Married with Children, "I'll see you in court" wasn't a grenade. It was just another day on the job. The cast arrived on set, read through the script, and rehearsed lines with the same rhythm and timing they had honed over 3 seasons. The crew lit the seedy motel set, rolled cameras on the courtroom gags, and wrapped production like they had dozens of times before. No one thought this episode was going to be different. It was raunchy, sure. It was embarrassing, definitely. But that was the Bundys. Awkward intimacy, humiliating circumstances, and absurd legal battles, that was their bread and butter. The idea that this one would be shelved never crossed anyone's mind. Ed O'Neill, after his character of Al Bundy, said he never figured out what it was about this particular episode that made it the target of cancellation. He felt he had been harsher on the air when it came to fat women, bitter speeches on marriage, and off-the-cuff jokes about death. And yet, none of that seemed to bother the censors remotely. Katie Sagal, Peg, thought the motel episode was funny exactly because it was not sexy. It was pathetic, awkward, and unromantic, which is pretty much Al and Peg in a nutshell. To her, the ridiculousness of the Bundys finding themselves unwilling stars of a private tape captured everything the show was about. Plain, everyday folks doing a spectacular job of failing at the most mundane situations in life. Just as perplexed were the writers. Michael G. Moy later explained that the script had gone through the normal approval processes without incident. It was only after Rakolta's boycott and the ensuing panic among sponsors that alarms began to sound. All of a sudden, the legal and moral ramifications of a secret recording storyline became a red flag. What had been a funny, absurd twist on humiliation now looked like a potential liability. In future DVD commentary, Moyer recalled how the Backlash had turned a seemingly safe episode into a legal headache that Fox did not want to touch. It was not the content itself that doomed it, it was the climate surrounding it. Among the crew, the shelving of the episode turned into a running joke. Some called it the Bundy Bermuda Triangle episode filmed, finished, and then vanished without explanation. Others whispered that it might resurface someday because it was simply too good to stay hidden. For years, though, it remained a ghost. Fans speculated wildly. Some swore it had aired once in Canada. Others thought it was destroyed. In truth, the tapes sat intact, stored carefully but purposefully excluded from syndication packages and DVD box sets. To the people who worked on it, the disappearance didn't make sense. It was funny, outrageous, and no riskier than dozens of other installments they had filmed. Yet the silence around the episode only fueled its legend. At cast reunions and in interviews, it always came up. What really happened to the lost episode? Actors would laugh, writers would shrug their shoulders, and everyone would agree that it really is strange that, of all things, that storyline was buried. One weekday afternoon, without ads or applause, the ghost walked onto television. The Quiet FX Resurfacing. For more than a decade, I'll See You in Court lived only as a rumor. Fans traded whispers in magazine columns and early internet chat rooms about a mysterious, missing episode. Some claimed it had aired once in another country. Others swore it had been destroyed to avoid lawsuits. In truth, the episode was complete, sitting untouched in the archives. Then, in 2002, without any announcement, the cable network that had acquired the syndication rights to Married with Children made a quiet move. One weekday afternoon, sandwiched between reruns of familiar Bundy chaos, the lost episode appeared. Nothing was advertised, teased, or even announced with a press release. For the average viewer, it was just another episode in the marathon rotation. But it didn't take long for lapsed fans to pick up on it. Almost instantly, forums were alive with posts. Did anyone else just see that? Was that the missing one? Lines quoted, scenes dissected, disbelief shared. For the first time in U.S. broadcast history, the episode band was open and live. The shock wasn't that it aired. It was aired in full, uncensored, with nothing trimmed for content. Reactions were as divergent as possible. Devoted fans were ecstatic, for this was the holy grail for them. This proved that the episode existed and was what it said it would be. The jokes lived up to the series' legacy. Many thought it echoed perfectly the Aggie, stinging tone of the show. Others, however, were not so sure. One storyline about hidden cameras and unwanted exposure played for laughs, but now had a tinge of truth that cut sharper than it did in the early 2000s. That was becoming a staple in the tabloids. Some viewers laughed, but others winced. noting how eerily the episode anticipated scandals that would eventually dominate headlines years later. It was a wonderful thing to air. An episode that has been considered lost has yet again been converted from an urban legend into living proof. Viewers have debated for years whether Fox overreacted or the show crossed the line. Now, everyone who watches the broadcast can see for themselves. The verdict? It wasn't obscene. Not even the raunchiest Bundy story went in this close to the wind. The subject, not the jokes, was what made it dangerous in 1989, clearer than ever while watching in 2002. They treated the broadcast just like any other day. No ad campaign, no special banned episode live event. This will get scattered entries and will vanish again as the schedule shifts and contracts change. It was never just presented as a found treasure. It was just dropped in and pulled back out. But the effect was irreversible. The fans had seen it. They had the proof. Ghost is real. Now, demands for its surfacing have increased. Fans wanted it included into box set of DVDs. Online petitions started sailing. Writers and entertainment journalists have to revive memories of the boycott years and the ridiculousness attached to burying the episode. Cast members were asked again about it in interviews and reunions. Suddenly, I'll See You in Court wasn't just a novelty. It became a banner under which fan action could be organized. A reminder that censorship and sponsor panic could silence art, even when that art was just a crude sitcom gag. 2 decades later, the viewing world looks nothing like 1989 or even 2002. Why it can air now? 3 decades ago, I'll See You in Court was a grenade waiting to explode. Today, it looks more like a time capsule, still sharp, still uncomfortable, but finally in sync with the culture around it. The biggest change isn't in the episode itself, but in the world it's returning to. In 1989, networks were chained to FCC guidelines, beholden to advertisers, and terrified of watchdog groups. One angry letter could trigger a boycott. One misstep could drain sponsor money. In that climate, Fox was too young to gamble. Shelving the episode was survival. But in 2025, the landscape is different. Streaming platforms dominate. Advertisers no longer dictate what makes it to air. And audiences are far more accustomed to stories that explore messy, uncomfortable truths. The alteration of audience expectations has been tremendously consequential. Today's viewers have lived through decades and decades of shows that have pushed limits far past what Married with Children would have ever dared. Series like The Sopranos, Euphoria, South Park, and Black Mirror have all made the discourse around sex, violence, trauma, and surveillance shamelessly vulgar. When a storyline about hidden cameras was once too shocking, today it seems relevant and even needed. We live in a world of phone hacking, leaked videos, and non-stop surveillance. Topics that sent executives scurrying in 1989, consent, privacy, exposure, lie no longer on the far side of taboos.
How could I hear anything the way you snore? Ugh. What was that?
They are front-page news. They are mundane conversations. What was, once upon a time, too real to laugh at is now the very conversation people actually want to have. The business model has evolved as well. When FX aired the episode in 2002, it was done quietly because, at that time, cable still relied on advertisers and wasn't eager to take risks. But these days, streaming services answer directly to consumers, with no advertising interrupting them to scare sponsors away. Companies like Sony Pictures Television can now market I'll See You in Court not as a liability, but as an asset, something to be sold to those fans who are hungry for lost media, hard-to-come-by material, and poor quality. Here, disclaimers, commentary, and behind-the-scenes context will blunt criticism and make the release feel like an event. What was once thought to threaten advertisers can now be monetized directly, with no intermediary telling networks to pull the plug. There is also an argument to be made from a contemporary standpoint. In 1989, the episode was considered indecent, even dangerous. But one can easily argue that its point was satirizing voyeurism rather than siding with it. In fact, the only thing the tape does is humiliate the Bundys. The motel is a site of exploitation, not romance. The courtroom is more a circus, converting victims into punchlines than ever a path to justice. Viewed in light of today, the jokes are painful but also prophetic. In retrospect, the episode seems to have gone beyond poking fun at a culture that doesn't value privacy.
I don't want to be alone! You don't love me!
That satirical slant, once suffocated by fear, gives the episode even more weight today. Changing times don't escape Sony's notice. The forthcoming reissue of the episode I'll See You in Court under the remastered collection Too Hot for Prime Time seems more about timing than nostalgia. New interviews, commentary from cast and creators, and a brief documentary regarding its very banishment will collectively treat the episode as a cultural artifact. It will not slip away from the limelight, as FX did in 2002. Instead, it will be given prominent recognition for the way in which the TV show hesitated upon issues that are now impossible to ignore. This very concept transforms a once-canceled episode into an entertainment and history lesson, and the timing couldn't be better. Audiences today are not just interested, they are downright obsessed with lost media. YouTube, Reddit, and other podcasts devote entire episodes to tracking down every episode buried by the networks. What could have otherwise been forgotten has turned into a prize in culture. In its time, crude, lowbrow, and disposable thoughts may have been simply laid upon the Bundys. Yet this episode now adds some weight to them. A half-hour sitcom played for laughs accidentally brought the still ongoing debate on privacy to the fore, which raises the real question, beyond novelty, why it still hits hard. At first glance, I'll See You in Court looks like another raunchy Bundy storyline. A motel, a scheme gone wrong, a courtroom circus. But the deeper you look, the more it stands apart. What made executives bury it in 1989 is exactly what makes it land today. It wasn't the sex jokes, it was the truth hiding under them. Consent, surveillance, and humiliation weren't comfortable subjects back then, and they still aren't now. The difference is that in 2025, the themes no longer feel out of place in mainstream storytelling. They feel eerily prophetic. The Bundys were a cartoonish family, but here they became unwilling victims of a violation that mirrors real-world scandals. That collision of absurd comedy with all too familiar anxiety gives the episode a bite sharper than most of the show's catalog. The satire seems to penetrate even deeper in today's world.
A crippled family coming through.
The Bundys discover that they have been recorded without their consent, and instead of justice for the couple, they are mockingly punished. That joke hits entirely differently now. A clear forerunner for the private video incidents that we face today, where victims are often blamed for their own exploitation, the episode showcases such acts of humiliation occurring on television. Sure, there is an exaggerated sense of farcicality in what goes on inside the courtroom, yet it is a true reflection of another truth. That much of the time, such shame is but entertainment. Laughter cannot erase the violation. It merely draws attention to it. The sting was reluctant for the executives to take in 1989, but that is exactly why the story carries meaning today. Another reason it hits so hard is the very fact that it points out the limitations of comedy itself. Married with Children prided itself on equal opportunity japing. No character was safe, no issue too trifling. But I'll See You in Court says, what happens when someone's privacy is the butt of the joke? The discomfort is the point. Peg and Al's humiliation isn't glamorous or romantic. It's just stupid, awkward, and humbling. That's what still makes the episode sting. It doesn't give a free, safe chuckle to the audience. It evokes laughter and induces cringe, and that tension. The episode also matters as a piece of television history.
How did we become a great country? By kicking the heinies of anybody who threatened.
In burying the episode, Fox revealed how power worked in the industry. Advertisers and executives dictated what audiences were allowed to see, not based on quality, but via fear. In a way, the suppression of the episode became part of its story. Once this restoration and release start, it becomes more than entertainment. It is a reminder of how networks went about silencing anything deemed uncomfortable. Watching it now is not just about the Bundys, it's about coming to terms with a history of censorship, panic, and the uneasy balance between profit and art. And of course, the fan aspect makes its return special. For years, I'll See You in Court has, in effect, been the holy grail of Bundy lore, discussed but never confirmed. To watch it today serves to somewhat close that circle, to see what was hidden, to laugh at what was denied, to feel how the show's most pointed barbs still hurt. It shows that even at its almost inane and infantile, Married could tap into something greater than simply sitcom discourse. It struck a nerve then, it strikes one now. If you want more buried, banned, or quietly erased moments from TV history like this video, drop a comment with the next lost episode you want unlocked and subscribe. When you're done here, watch the next video on your screen. We dig up another piece of pop culture they tried to keep out of sight.